Hello everyone, I'm Said. In this video, I'm going to talk about one of the most interesting things released in .NET 8 called .NET Aspire. Apart from how cool it is, I'm going to take a look how it works behind the scenes and see what problems .NET Aspire trying to solve for us. So let's see. So here I've created a simple diagram for what we had before .NET Aspire. So for example, we have a .NET application. But for having an enterprise application, for sure, you have a lot of different parts for the application. For example, you have maybe SQL database, NoSQL database. Maybe for cache, you're using Redis, monitoring, message brokers, Rabbit or Kafka. So here is the point. You have a lot of different parts that you need to care. So always you need to keep in mind, okay, what is this connection string for the Redis? You need to put all of this kind of user, password, what is the port, or even for the SQL databases or MongoDB, Cosmos DB. So this is really hard to maintain and really hard to manage the application. This kind of things always takes time from developer or even from DevOps guys to set up everything. As you can see, your .NET application almost points to all of these different parts. What Aspire try to solve for us or try to address this problem, it tried to centralize everything in the .NET application. I have created another part, very simple. But before checking this diagram, I want to create .NET Aspire application, the default one. You got the point here, I think. We have different services. Maybe someone call it baking services, a lot of different parts. And your application is actually one of these a lot of parts. .NET Aspire try to unify all of these interfaces, different resources, interfaces, and you only need to care of your logic. No need to think, I want to use a distributed cache, for example. What can I use? How can I use? Where can I get it? So this kind of things, I think we can use it very simple in the .NET Aspire. For having .NET Aspire in your machine, first you need to install workload. So by this command, .NET workload install Aspire, you can install these dependencies for having and creating .NET Aspire. And also for creating new project using this Aspire, you can use this command here, the CLI .NET new Aspire starter, and also you can use what other components I need. So here I just use this Redis cache and you can put your project name. Okay, very simple. It's possible to create .NET Aspire from the Visual Studio, but I don't have the preview version. So it's just, I can use this CLI command to create one. So after you create and run this command, you can have this project here. It will create one app host, one API service, which is your backend service, and also a service default and frontend, which is the web. By default, we have these 4 projects. In the normal way, maybe you say I have one API backend and one frontend. Done. I don't need to add extra project. Apart from this kind of different layers, I don't know, clean architecture or multi-layer architecture, I don't care. This is the kind of very simple scenario for your project. Maybe someone says, I'm using vertical slice architecture. I put everything in one layer, just putting different folder. This is kind of different topics that I don't want to talk about them. Anyway, here we have backend, frontend, and we have 2 more projects. One is app host and another one is service defaults, which is a library. Okay, this is a program CS of the app host. But before, let's go back to this image here. Actually, our app host will execute all of our projects. I don't need to go to the Visual Studio and set multiple startup project, web, API. No. Here, app host will take care of running all of my projects. In this case is API and web. Okay. And also we have the service default, which is, you can think of like a common layer between all of your projects. Maybe apart from this API and front end, you have another projects like consumers, like the other current jobs in your application. That's fine. Easily you can add more projects. And then app host needs to reference them to run. We have a big container here is app host, which contains all of the application and all of these dependencies. So here, this .NET app is only take care of your code and your .NET area. But this app host contains not only your .NET, but all of the other part of the application, like the front end. Front end, I mean, if you are using the Blazor or MVC Razor pages, that's fine. It's still here. But in case of maybe you're using React.js or another front-end frameworks, that's fine. Maybe it shouldn't be here. But we are talking about the .NET stack. You have another part, I call it containers. When we are talking about, okay, here, if you want to use the .NET Aspire, maybe you say, still I have these different parts in my application. Still I need to use Redis. Still I need to, for example, use this message broker or databases. Otherwise, my application doesn't work. It's true. And you don't need to take care of this running the, for example, Redis in different part of the server. Just you need to address Redis in the container part and also other part like Rabbit. There is different components in the .NET Aspire, and you can use the database, entity framework, or Cosmos DB. There is few components, but they are completing and they are adding more components to the .NET Aspire. Your front end usually call the API. But how? In normal way, when you have a front end, always you have a base address for calling API. And also maybe your front end needs some Redis or cache during your code in the front end side. But how? How it works? App host is the executor of all of our application. But how front end will point to the API? It uses some connection string or address, HTTP address, for example. Here in the .NET Aspire, we don't need to explicitly add the address of our API. For example, we say localhost port 5000, usually in the projects. But here we can use the service binding. So what is the service binding? Service binding is, we have it already in all of the other stack, like the Kubernetes, or there is also console that using specifically for this service discovery. So the point is, instead of using the address of the project, you put a name, you label it. For example, we label this API backend. So all you need is HTTP backend, done. No need to specify port, no need to specify extra domain for it. And this is very good for distributed applications because maybe during time you need to change the port, you need to change the domain address, but you don't care. This is the name API. I don't want to know, okay, what is behind? What is the address behind? The port is 100 or 1000. It doesn't matter for you. The very good point about the Aspire that your microservices or your project can use the service discovery for connecting to each other. And also in case of connection string is the same. So usually for connecting to the Redis or connecting to database, you need the connection string or again an address. But here still you can use the service discovery and just point to that name. In this diagram here, front end use the API using service binding, and also for connecting to, for example, Redis here, just need to use that name of the service. An API, maybe API is still using the Redis or RabbitMQ for using this kind of message brokers. Let's back to code and let's see what we have actually in this project. This is the program CS of the app host. First line is interesting. Before, always we had something like web application that create builder or default builder, but here we have distributed application. What is the difference? Let's see and go through the code what we have here. In the create builder, it's just a simple distribute application builder. Here you can put some argument and it returns the builder. Okay, let's go on. We're back to this point again. We need to use Redis. How? We can just set add Redis container. This is the app host project, .NET 8. Is Aspire host need to be true here? What's the point here? The point is you need to specify which project is your entry point, which project is responsible for executing the other projects. So by specifying this is Aspire host, it means this project, when you run the application, it try to run the other application of your solution. As we can see here, all of this API service and web is here for executing them for sure. And also Aspire hosting for taking care of all of these dependencies. What is the add Redis container? If we want to use Redis, simply very simple, no need to add anything else. Just you need to calling this method. And if we want to go here, this is part of Aspire hosting that we referenced it already. And this add Redis container, it will build your Redis image. One point currently, all of these different resources in the .NET Aspire needs to support or needs to be in a container, in a Docker image. We have a Docker image in the Docker repository, so they just need to download this image for the Redis and then run it. As we know, default port for Redis is 6379. Always is that, but you can customize the port as well. You can put it here. It's specify what is the image name for Docker image. It's Redis and tag is latest one. So currently it's not possible to customize the tag. You have to use always the latest one. For Redis, we assemble the Redis container and we have to use this add project extension in the iDistributed application. We have a keyword here, projects dot, for example, Aspire sample, our solution name and our project name. We can see this project keyword that contains the project names. Here is the Aspire sample dot, instead of dot they put this under score. So API service, Aspire sample dot API service, and we put a name for it. In this diagram, I mentioned that when frontend needs to use the API, it just needs to point the name as a service binding or service discovery. Here is the name. We call it API service. What is this Aspire sample, this kind of things? It's just a runtime building address, just for building a convenient way for you pointing to the different project. This one is at runtime build it at runtime, we can see that this is references and this service metadata. Actually, we have an assembly name, assembly path, and also the project path. So simply we can have all of our project in our solution. So here API service, service default, and also web. And also for the web frontend, again, we need to put a name for using in the service discovery. And this project needs to use the cache and also needs to use the API service. Very simple. It uses the API and also use the one of the containers, in this case is Redis. By this way, with reference cache and also with reference API service, we are telling the app host that frontend project needs to have a reference to the Redis. That's it. For referencing this different project, you can put many things here. Again, with reference, you can create another project. Very easy. Now let's run the project. The latest line here is for running our host. Before, I've created another video about the background service and hosted service. Please watch it, because in that video I talked about what is the host. Host is responsible for running all of those hosted services and background services. It's really good to know. But let's see what we have here in the distributed application. If I open this one, simply it's just run a sing method. There is another interesting point here. Usually in the web application, in the normal project, you have this line only, run a sing, calling the host, and then host will take care of running the different part of your application, running hosted services and other things. But here we have two lines. First one is suppress lifetime logging. When I check this code, I really like it, because actually .NET teams trying to hide some logs from the app host, because here they say if this publisher is not manifest, just return it. Otherwise, if this is the first time when you are running the project, it try to build some manifest or trying to do some magic for make your project works and connect different part of the project. It will set this log level of hosting lifetime to warning. By default is information. Maybe they are trying to do a lot of stuff, but by setting to the warning, actually they want to hide it from the user to not see what is happening behind the scenes. And also here, this reload is when you want to change the configuration, because configuration is actually singleton. So when your application run, you cannot change, but by changing some value and reloading all of these configuration providers, it will evaluate it again. Okay. So this reload is for matching this value for the lifetime logging configuration. So this suppress lifetime log is for that. And also another one is execute before start hooks. Let's see what we have here. So usually this Aspire using some events for interacting between different parts of the application. But here we have distributed application lifetime hook and also distributed application model. This app model actually is your different projects, is point to the projects or container, any part of your project that is runnable, that is run when hosts try to run your project. Okay, it just try to calling this method one by one, all of these live hooks, and pass this app model and done. It's nothing here, at least I cannot see implementation. Maybe after I can check the GitHub repository for checking the code. Here after it will call all of these hooks before running the actual application. And then it simply called the host for running all of the different parts of the application. Let's run the project and let's see what we have. What we have in the log here is the dashboard of the Aspire. One of the really interesting part of the Aspire, I think, is this dashboard, because you can see everything about your application. OTLP server running at this port. This is for open telemetry, for gathering all of the logs from the different part of the application, and then we'll visualize those logs here in the dashboard. Here is the dashboard, and we have two projects, API service and web frontend. For example, this API, this is the endpoint. Simply you can just click on it, it will open the API. So by default is weather forecast, this list of this data, and also for front-end part, this is the hello world of the Blazor application, so you can see what we have. I'm sure that you have seen a lot of different videos about this dashboard. I just try to quickly check it. Another different part is container, which is using, if you remember, we add Redis container as a cache with the name cache. So we can see here is the name, and the container image is the Redis tag latest. And if I open my Docker desktop, I can see that it's already downloaded, it's running. I didn't do anything. I just put those names there and then just run the application. Okay. Well, for the tracing, this is another interesting point. If I just call it multiple times to have more traces here, you can see it's real-time update. This one is actually web frontend is using Redis cache as an output. So we can see this data Redis here, and API service, very, very good one. If you use the application insight in the Azure portal, you can see such this different information. It's really interesting. When you send a request, it goes to the web frontend first, and then API service, and then we'll call the cache for caching the stuff. And here we have some metrics. You can see the different metrics based on the project, for example, for API or for web frontend as well. So this is really good one because it will give you more deep information about the, for example, here active requests. In case of you have a lot of requests on the server, you can see how many requests per second you have, or even for the Kestrel one, CPU, memory, anything. That's really good. That's it for now. I wanted to check this Aspire, very simple. I'm going to create multiple videos to check how we can use it in the different part of the application, how we can use the Redis, how we can use the RabbitMQ, or even SQL database. So this project going to be completed during time. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We will have multiple videos about this Aspire. I think this Aspire will grow very, very more than this, because .NET community will working on it, and this is very good to know from the beginning and how it works, how you can use it in your daily job, your projects. That's all for now. Thank you for your time. Bye.